The Indianapolis Colts are heading north to take on the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field this weekend. Can Anthony Richardson overcome an aggressive Packers defense? And can the Colts stop Josh Jacobs and a Jordan Love-less Packers offense? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined here by my co-host and colleague at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, the Colts have moved on to the Packers, and honestly, they have a grand opportunity to get their first win of the year because it doesn't look like Jordan Love is going to suit up on Sunday for the Packers, which means the starting quarterback is going to be Malik Willis, the former Tennessee Titan, who has really only been with the Packers for a few weeks. So all the betting markets are going to the Colts, and really this game looks, at least from the onset, that it should be ripe for the Colts taking.
Yeah, and you're hoping, you're praying, if you're a Colts fan, that this is not a pitfall game, but there is, we'll dive into why we think this might be a complete and utter lock for the Indianapolis Colts. The Packers outside of Jordan Love, we talked about the Colts cornerback situation. They were one injury away. The Packers were one injury away from being in a dire QB situation. So they really weren't ready for this kind of thing yet. So I think that Colts have a grand opportunity, like you mentioned, coming off of a tough season opening loss at home.
Yeah, they really do. And even though the Colts are facing or look like they will be facing Malik Willis this weekend, that gives them no right to overlook this Packers team because the Colts still gave up 212 yards on the ground. And the Colts are going up against Josh Jacobs, a very good running back. On the offensive side of the football, I mean, Anthony Richardson and this offense are going up against a very aggressive Packers defense that loves to get after the football, loves to force turnovers. So just because Jordan Love isn't out there doesn't mean that this game is an automatic win for the Indianapolis Colts. Let's look at the chat here. NFL Nerd is watching from lacrosse practice, but hey, he's still joining us. So we really appreciate it, buddy. Going above and beyond, that's for sure. Stats Matt is in the chat as always. Good to see you, my brother. And we've got Augustin Ramirez. Shout out to Andrew and Drake. Keep the awesome Colts content coming. Greetings from Panama. Well, hey, thank you so much from across. I wouldn't say across the pond, but hey, you're still out there and enjoying Colts content. We love to see Colts fans out there from other countries. So, Augustin, really appreciate all of your support. And as other people join in here tonight, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts _SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that bell to turn on notifications so you know when Drake and I go live, whenever Noah goes live with the Shoehorn podcast, so you never miss us. And if you can't catch us live, we're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. And I think Drake just messaged me in the private chat that I think it's Augustine. Augustine. Well, hey, if I'm butchering your name, I do apologize, brother. Just let me know, call me out in the chat. Perfectly fine with that. So, but Drake, let's dive into it, to a very important week 2 matchup for the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts heading into this one, before the Jordan Love injury, the Colts, I think, were 4-point underdogs. Now they're 3-point favorites, and typically Vegas does give the home team 2 to 3 points on the line. So that kind of shows you how big of favorites the Colts are this weekend over the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. The over-under set to 40.5 for Sunday's matchup. And like I mentioned, Drake, really this contest is going to be derived from how the Colts can respond and rebound against a Packers offense that I think is going to heavily rely on the run game this weekend.
Yeah, and it really, those odds that you mentioned show just how important the quarterback position has become, because you're looking at a 7-point swing basically, which is outrageous, which again shows the dire situation for the quarterback position for Green Bay. And we'll dive into Malik Willis. We'll dive into why that running game is going to be so important for Green Bay. But again, the Colts also, like you mentioned early in the episode, they just got their asses kicked in the ground game. I mean, 213 yards allowed, 159 to Joe Mixon himself. I mean, they absolutely were peppering the Colts in the ground game. So you can't count out any team after what the Colts, allowed to happen to them defensively.
Exactly. But let's look at the offense first. And Anthony Richardson coming off of a performance where he only had 9 completions, with 9 for 19, but had 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, 56 yards, and a rushing touchdown. A big game for Anthony Richardson. Now, can he back that up against the Green Bay Packers? And I think, Drake, heading into this, really what the focus is going to be on for Anthony Richardson is hitting the layups. As we've got Logan Schmidt, the GOAT, in the chat. One of my buddies sent a post of Logan's to me yesterday. If you're not following Logan on X, you're really missing out. And Logan, I think you're going to be at that game. Well, I'm going to be up in Green Bay as well. I'll be there taking in all the sights and sounds from Lambeau. We got to meet up at some point. So good to see you, brother. But yeah, Drake, I think that because of what the Colts were able to do last weekend against the Texans, hitting plays of 60, 57, and 54 yards, I really think defenses are going to adjust to that. So in my opinion, what Anthony Richardson is going to need to focus on this weekend, really hitting those layups, because when you look at this Packers defense, there were some times that they gave up some big chunk plays to Jalen Hurts last week as well. Allowed 278 yards and 2 touchdowns to Hurts. So I think after having a game where they allowed some explosive plays to Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, plus seeing what Anthony Richardson was able to do against the Texans, I really think this Packers defense is going to be prepared to really defend those chunk plays. But what do you think? What do you think the Packers defense, or how do you think the Packers defense, I should say, is going to defend Anthony Richardson in this passing game?
So, I mean, well, first off, you do have Kenny Clark. I know that he's currently listed as questionable, but he's a destroyer on the inside. I mean, he's really, really a world eater. He'll take double teams all day, and he will take your best blocks. So I think he's going to provide enough stoppage in the ground game that it's going to, like you said, it's going to make Richardson need to throw more. But I really think that this is a team that, like Jair Alexander got just really ate alive last week. I mean, he did not look good. And I'm not saying that they have an AJ Brown or Devontae Smith right now, but the Colts have weapons that are explosive enough to challenge this man, especially on the outside. So I think that the way that they're going to attack Richardson, though, is like you said, they're going to force him to make those layups. Actually, they're going to probably give him those 10 to 12, 15-yard passes and say, you can get that deep one when you're falling off your back foot. You can throw screen passes and you can zip it across the field when you're running. But how about you stand in the pocket and you throw it over a linebacker's head precisely? So they're going to make him throw those precision throws and see if he can really, hit those accurately, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take very much time for opposing defenses to adjust to this Colts offense and really try to make sure that they don't let anything happen over the top, which means playing usually 2 deep safeties, making sure the cornerbacks are off, just making sure that you're never behind the Colts offense doesn't get behind you in a sense. So I think that the Packers will adjust to that, but I'm not saying that means the Colts shouldn't try explosive plays, shouldn't try to take some shots. Absolutely. You got to keep the defense honest. Even if they are in some of those coverages, you're going to have opportunities, and Shane Steichen's going to be able to scheme up some plays and some route concepts that the Colts will have a couple of opportunities for explosive plays. I just don't think that what we saw against the Texans is necessarily going to be the norm, Drake. So when you take all of that into account, Anthony Richardson has to be better on those short to intermediate throws, making sure you're not rushing the throw, being accurate, and not making sure you are going through all of your reads and making the correct decision. Stats Matt saying, I think now that teams have seen it, they may start playing too deep. And if Josh Downs is back, that could be a major problem for defenses. Certainly. I don't think necessarily it's just Josh Downs. I think Michael Pittman only had 4 catches for 31 yards on Sunday. The Colts were trying to get him involved, but just couldn't get him couldn't get the ball to him over just a couple of plays. AD Mitchell, I think, gets more involved. I think those mistakes, those miscommunications, the mistiming via Richardson and Mitchell, I think those are going to end up being worked out. So you may not see as many explosive plays. You may still see one or two explosive plays out of the Colts this weekend, because with Anthony Richardson, it's always a possibility. But I think for this Colts passing game to have success and for them to sustain drives, something the Colts have really talked about all week, so those defenses isn't out there for 40 minutes, it's got to hit those layups, you got to hit those short throws, you got to hit those plays that are just drive movers rather than always going for the shot play.
Yeah, and hey, it's really just adjusting, kind of tuning the strength of that arm. I mean, Richardson has an absolute rocket for an arm. And I know that everyone talks about that Pierce throw, but I was also wildly impressed by the one to Dillon, because Azeez Al-Shaair jumped for the ball, and it was so damn quick. It was wobbling in the air uncontrollably, and he was just leaving with it. I mean, it was incredible how hard he threw it. So, yeah, some of these throws are going to be gimmies, and you're going to go, oh, my gosh, you got to hit that. A lot of them are going to sail. Some of them are going to dirt, but I'm telling you, that throw to Alec Pierce did not take that long to leave his hands from the time he took that snap. It's not like the play was 5 seconds long. So that play happened quickly. Don't be surprised if they try something like that again.
I'm also going to be very interested to see how the Packers defend the QB run game with Anthony Richardson, because last week they did a really good job of making sure Jalen Hurts couldn't really run wild in the quarterback run game. Hurts he had 13 carries, but it was only for 33 yards. So it's 2.5 yards per carry for Jalen Hurts. Anthony Richardson, I think last week averaged over 6 yards per carry, if I remember correctly. So they did a really good job of stymieing the quarterback run game and the read option game with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. We'll kind of have to see if they're able to do that again this week against the Colts at Richardson and Taylor. If not, then we could see maybe a more aggressive ground attack by the Colts. And that's kind of leads us to talking about Jonathan Taylor. Obviously not his best game last week against the Texans. Looking at the film though, Drake, it's not like I don't put a lot of blame on Jonathan Taylor. I just put a lot of, I think it was more that the Texans just playing really good football to stop the run. In the film, Jonathan Taylor really couldn't have gone. He kind of got all he could out there is what I'm trying to say. So I think he only had about 48 yards or something. That definitely has to improve, especially if the Colts want to, like they've been talking about all week, continues to sustain those drives. So Drake, what do you think about Jonathan Taylor? Do you think that he's going to have a bounce back week, or what are your expectations for JT going into week 2?
I mean, I go based off of what the Eagles did with Saquon Barkley. Now, obviously, he's way more of your agility guy, your elusive guy, where Taylor's just one cut, done, you're out of there. No way are you catching him. And he can also be a goal line operator, too. He's much bigger than you think. I think he has an opportunity for a bounce-back game, but I also think the Packers have an opportunity on the interior, especially if Kenny Clark plays, to really force the tackles to work. They're going to need to go to the outside if Kenny Clark plays. But I don't know, man. Green Bay typically has a pretty stout defense. I would say that it might be a tough one for Jonathan Taylor, just because they always come with that grinded out type of approach, and they're at Lambeau. I mean, I think that they're going to be really, really predicating their success on stopping the run and stopping that deep ball and forcing Richardson to throw those, like we said, precision intermediate throws.
So you talked about the last week when the Packers played against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Packers did allow 144 yards on the ground, but it was only at a 3.8 yards per carry clip. So it wasn't like they were allowing chunk runs. They did allow some chunk runs to Saquon Barkley, if I remember correctly, because Barkley had 109 yards for 2 touchdowns. So Barkley certainly had a really good game. But I think he even had, he even had a rushing or a receiving touchdown, 3 touchdowns altogether for Saquon Barkley. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Jonathan Taylor could have a game like that. However, I do think that the Colts need to be a little bit more creative with their run fits on Sunday. I also think that maybe sticking to the run game a little bit more is what's going to help Jonathan Taylor. And I'm not just talking about handing it off to him 30 times. I don't think that's necessarily the answer, but sticking to the run game as far as adding more RPOs and just keeping Jonathan Taylor involved throughout, keeping the Packers defense on their heels so it isn't as predictable. I think so. Am I expecting a bounce back game for Jonathan Taylor? I'd certainly think he will play better than he did against the Texans. I could see Jonathan Taylor getting close to or even surpassing 100 yards and grabbing another touchdown or two. I really think it's going to be predicated on where this Packers defense is focusing in on. If they're focusing in on stopping the explosive deep pass from Anthony Richardson, then I think you're going to see more out of Jonathan Taylor. If the Packers are really focusing in on the run game, kind of like they did against the Philadelphia Eagles, trying to stop the RPO game with Hurts and Barkley, they're focusing in on trying to stop it with Richardson and Taylor, then it might not be as prolific of a game for Taylor necessarily, but you might see more explosive plays and more plays out of this passing game.
Yeah, but I like how you mentioned that, this defense is going to be ready also for them to try to lean on Jonathan Taylor. So I think that you will definitely get a better game because you averaged only 3 yards a carry. I think he had 16 carries for 48 yards. So outside of that touchdown, that is not a good day. So I think you're going to best that. I think that he'll probably get more than 20 carries because Green Bay typically, they always get into these just real grinded out type of games if they can help it, especially with their quarterback being out. So I think that it's going to be interesting, but it would be nice if Jonathan Taylor could probably at least find the end zone, maybe average over 4 yards a carry.
Yeah, and then this Packers defensive line is no slouch either. I mean, you guys got Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary. You mentioned Kenny Clark, who's one of the best nose tackles in the game, if not the best nose tackle in football. You've got Luke Van Ness out there as well. They've got some guys on the defensive line for the Packers that can not only rush the passer, but they're fairly good against the run as well. So because the Colts like to run a lot of inside running plays with Jonathan Taylor in between the tackles, there's going to have to be guys on Kenny Clark. You're talking about Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Will Fries. Will Fries and Quentin Nelson currently are the number 1 and number 3 graded guards according to Pro Football Focus. Pro Football Focus thought they had a fantastic game last week against the Texans, but it didn't show up as far as too many yards out of Jonathan Taylor. I think we have to see if that could change and just opening bigger holes for Jonathan Taylor inside stats. Matt, we also have to remember Jonathan Taylor still touched the ball on 40% of the offensive plays. And that's a very good point. That is a very good point. So again, when the Colts only had it for 40 something plays, Jonathan Taylor, I think, had 16 carries, something like that. So he was definitely highly involved in the offense. I think just making the most out of those opportunities too, because Jonathan Taylor was 16 carries in a game. You're probably expecting him to be around at least 75, 80, 85 yards just because of the player Jonathan Taylor is and the offensive line that's in front of him. Not 16 carries for 48 yards. Just more production out of Jonathan Taylor, I think, is needed, not only for this offense to continue and sustain those drives, but take some pressure off Anthony Richardson and kind of let him get into a rhythm as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it also will help him make those runs even more impactful because I think he only had 6 carries and he still led the team in rushing yards with like 56 yards. So, I mean, he was running, and he was running really strong. So I think that if Taylor can just keep going and get a little bit more of a pace probably established early, that could really help them dominate the ground game for the rest of the game.
Exactly. Now, talking about the pass catchers, you did mention Josh Downs. Josh Downs has been practicing in a limited capacity this week. So last week he said he was really close, said he was 70%. This week he feels between 80 and 90% there. Really just wants to see if he's able to go out there and cut and move around without any soreness in his ankle. He's been limited in practice the past 2 days. So it seems like Drake is trending in the right direction for Josh Downs to play on Sunday. If Josh Downs is out there, though, I'll be honest, I don't think he's going to play a full 100% snap game. I think he will be on a snap on a pitch count. I think he will be out there for a certain amount of plays, maybe in some certain packages. But I think because, again, he hasn't practiced. This is really the first 2 days of practice he's had in 5 weeks, and they don't want to push it too bad where he re-injures that ankle. They got to be smart about this. So I would assume if he does play, he's going to be on a pitch count. But even though he is on a pitch count, I still think he's going to make an impact. So I'll ask you, what type of impact do you think Josh Downs would be able to make if he is able to suit up and go out there and play on Sunday against the Packers? Hope you're on mute.
Usually I don't do that, man. So I think that he's set, about a 85% Josh Downs is still a pretty crisp inside route runner. I think that quick win ability is just second to none on the Colts. So I think that while you can, and they will put Adonai Mitchell in that position, and he showed success, got targeted 5 times against the Texans, I still think they want Josh Downs to be that inside operator. But yeah, I think he'll definitely be on a pitch count, probably just 2 or 3 catches. I think it'll be reminiscent of the Patriots game last year where they were in Germany and he only had like 2 catches. But hopefully it doesn't come down to him having to make the game-winning grab.
Right. There's only two or three catches for Downs that game, but they were very impactful catches. So I do think that it will help in the short to intermediate game. Again, like I said, I don't expect Josh Downs to be out there with a full offensive workload. And I think that's fine because you have wide receivers that can fill in for Josh Downs. You put Michael Pittman in the slot, you certainly put Adonai Mitchell in the slot. He has showed case that he's able to handle that role and produce at that role. But I do think that Josh Downs does bring a little something extra to this Colts offense when he's out there in the slot. His ability just how quickly he can win at the line of scrimmage and be kind of that security blanket for Anthony Richardson. Allow Richardson to get rid of the football and complete those quick passes and get into a rhythm. So that way you can move the change. He really is their short, quick win guy. And I think the chemistry that he's built with Anthony Richardson as well certainly goes a long way. It's pretty obvious that Anthony Richardson and Adonai Mitchell are still working on their timing and then their chemistry, because we've seen a few times now where they haven't been able to connect and haven't really been able to Richardson hasn't been able to hit Mitchell. And I think that will come with time. That doesn't worry me. But with Josh Downs and Anthony Richardson, that chemistry is already there. That continuity is already there between those two. You rarely ever see those guys having a miscommunication. So again, I just think that helps the overall efficiency of this offense. While Josh Downs may not have the biggest day necessarily, go out there and catch like 6 passes for 120 yards, he might still be able to go out there, grab a couple of balls, get a few first downs, and just be someone that Anthony Richardson can turn to sort of get into a rhythm.
Yeah, and again, when it comes down to him having, a little bit of a nagging injury and still being able to play and making an impact, they're going to turn to whatever he does best. And that's going to be quick win. He'll be able to get down quickly, 6-7 yards. If he doesn't see contact, maybe he can get a little bit more because Josh Downs is still fast. So we'll have to see how he gets used, but I think that they kind of want to find that nice happy medium where he gets a little bit of action, but that doesn't get too much to where you start getting worried that he's going to, come out of there with a Juju Brent situation where it's like, oh, hey, by the way, that little knee aggravation, he's out for the year.
Now let's move on to the defensive side of the football for the Indianapolis Colts. Like I mentioned before, starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love, doesn't look like he is going to play. Matt LaFleur has not officially ruled him out, but I'm about 99% sure that the Packers will be starting Malik Willis at quarterback on Sunday. Malik Willis, that Packers actually traded for Malik Willis just a few weeks ago, hasn't been with the team very long. As we all know, he was a former third-round pick of the Tennessee Titans. Didn't really work out there. So Malik Willis really could be still learning this offense and doesn't even have the entire playbook down at this point. That could be a very real possibility. So, Drake, this is kind of a 2-part question. What do you think the Packers' game plan is going to be for Malik Willis? And then secondly, what do you think is the best way for this Colts defense to defend Malik Willis out there on Sunday? Because again, we're kind of going into this game with a quarterback on one side that's fairly unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I think right out of the way or right out of the gate when you're talking about, because we already talked about the ground game, it's going to be huge. Okay. But when you're talking about, I think the passing game, you really want to try to get Jaden Reed as involved as possible. Okay. You're talking about a guy who can run the ball. All right. Last year he had like 11 carries for like over 100 yards. Okay. So the guy is just, he's terrifying. He also had a 33-yard rushing touchdown last week to go along with his other work through the air. So this guy's a scary dude. And they're going to use him. I think they're going to really use the heck out of the tight ends. You've got Luke Musgrave. You've got Tucker Kraft. I think they're going to use those guys a lot to help him in blocking and with just getting the ball out quickly. But, man, if they get next to the end or if they get near the end zone around the red zone and they start to actually have a little bit of issues running the football, look for a guy like Christian Watson to be that red zone target. I think he's just been more of a red zone target than anything. So I think there's ways to attack the Colts. They don't have the best secondary situation, but the thing about Willis is he's turnover prone, and he is just incredibly and wildly inaccurate.
Yeah, and that's why I think that the Colts' best way to attack this is by making sure they don't allow Malik Willis to get free. Because I've as Stats Matt said, and I fully agree with this. I would think the runs would be including Malik Willis and then quick passes. So I agree. I do think that part of this is going to be Malik Willis is going to be a part of the run game and a part of the game plan running the football along with Josh Jacobs. Drake, I think that's one way that you can allow him to get some yardage and get some positive plays for this Packers offense, because Malik Willis, while he's not a very good passer, he is still a decent enough athlete that he can make plays with his legs. Another stats Matt must have my notes or something. Make Malik uncomfortable, make him have to think on the fly. And that's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Use some disguises on this defense and make sure that Malik Willis has to make those decisions after the ball is snapped, because that processing speed just isn't going to be there. Make him uncomfortable, as Stats Matt said. You don't want to allow him also to get outside the pocket so he doesn't have rushers around him. No naked bootlegs. If the Colts have to, they can play. They need to play contain as much as possible with their ends to not let Malik Willis outside of the pocket where plays break down. We already saw the Colts when plays broke down last week against the Texans. The defense certainly wasn't at its best and allowed C.J. Stroud to make some really good throws. So, again, containing Malik Willis in that pocket, forcing him to be a passer, because as we've seen, Drake, in the limited action that Malik Willis has shown us in the NFL, if you're relying on him to be a passer, it's not going to be good. It really isn't going to be good for your football team. So, again, I do think that when he is going to be passing, it's not going to be long developing plays. They want the football to get out of Malik Willis's hands fairly quickly. So I do think they're going to try to use quick passes, so the pass rush of the Colts can't get to Malik Willis and make him feel uncomfortable. So potentially, do we see more press out of the Colts? That's what I would personally do. We'll see if Gus Bradley follows suit, but I think you can attack Malik Willis in a couple of different ways. But the biggest thing is just make sure he stays in the pocket and turn him into a pocket passer that has to read the defense. No quick throws, no RPOs to let him get in the run game, no naked bootlegs to allow him to get into open space. Turn him into a traditional pocket passer and make him throw the football.
Yeah, I mean, up to this point, he hasn't thrown a single career touchdown. He's thrown 3 interceptions. I mean, it's the blueprint is there. And the thing, I like what Stats Matt said about, and you both, about making him think on the fly, because Matt LaFleur and company, they are going to have him ready with like one read, not there, go. Okay. I mean, I'm not saying he's a college quarterback, but they kind of have to treat him by NFL standards like a college quarterback. Like, he's not going to make more than a couple reads, or else you're going to get a sack, or he's going to run out of the pocket and throw it away.
Exactly. But I think overall, the biggest thing for this defense, the run defense has to show up. We've talked about it ad nauseum already. 212 yards allowed to the Houston Texans last week, 159 yards allowed to Joe Mixon alone. Joe Mixon ended up being the AFC Offensive Player of the Week because of his performance against the Indianapolis Colts. And last week, the Packers ran the ball very effectively. Now, it was a different quarterback out there, so that does have to be taken into account. But the Packers had 163 yards on the ground against the Philadelphia Eagles. They averaged 7.8 yards per carry. So that rushing offense for the Green Bay Packers was moving. Now, we do have to say that on one of those runs was Jaden Reed. He did have one attempt, and it did go for 33 yards, the only rushing touchdown. But Josh Jacobs was moving at a 5.3 yards per attempt. Emmanuel Wilson was at 11.5 yards per attempt. So the Packers were able to move the football on the ground. And I would be shocked if they didn't try to test this Colts run defense as well and really try to pound the football down the throat with Josh Jacobs, who honestly is still while he didn't have the best year a season ago with the Raiders, nobody did. But 2 years ago, he led the entire NFL in rushing, and he's still a very, very good running back that can take over a game.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Josh Jacobs, a guy who's like you mentioned, he's an incredibly accomplished runner. He's a former All-Pro. I mean, a first-team All-Pro. So, I mean, he's a guy who can absolutely get it done for you now. Like you mentioned, you do have to account this quarterback situation because the Colts, not saying you don't have to worry about the pass, right? Because it is a professional quarterback. I mean, you still can't let guys run open. But, man, does it make it easier to contain potentially Josh Jacobs? I think that he's more of your traditional three-down back. He's really not a guy who's going to break an 80-yard run. He doesn't have that kind of speed. He's just way more of a bowling ball athlete type of guy. But you just can't let him get a rhythm. And then you can't allow Malik Willis to also become a factor in the ground game because he will become a problem. He's the kind of guy that in this situation with their quarterback, they'll give it to him 25, 30 times if they can.
And something we also have to consider with the run defense of the Indianapolis Colts is DeForest Buckner likely isn't going to be out there 100%, if at all. Now, DeForest Buckner has not practiced the past 2 days because of a back injury. He has publicly said that he's going to be good to go. And while he said he's probably going to be a game time decision, I would be shocked if DeForest Buckner actually misses this game because he has only missed 2 games in his entire career. One of them was his rookie year with the San Francisco 49ers. The other one was in 2020, and that's because the NFL forced DeForest Buckner not to play because he tested positive for COVID. Other than that, DeForest Buckner has been out there and played through everything. Now, if DeForest Buckner does play, though, it would not surprise me if he was also on a pitch count, if he was also only in there on certain snaps. When DeForest Buckner had this injury flare up in his back last season against the Los Angeles Rams, Buckner only played on third downs. I could honestly see a situation on Sunday where Buckner only plays again on third down. So that means that's going to be a lot of Grover Stewart, a lot of Raekwon Davis, who wasn't great in his first game with the Colts on Sunday. Unfortunately, you're going to see Taven Bryan in there, Adetomo Adebawore. Do the Colts put Dayo Odangbo in there at times? It's going to be a cluster of guys. It's not going to be one specific guy that's going to try to replace DeForest Buckner on those downs. But if Buckner can't handle his full workload, it's going to be a committee. And that certainly is going to have a very big impact on this run defense because if I remember correctly, DeForest Buckner was practically the best run defender for the Indianapolis Colts last week against the Texans. You take away that, man, it could get ugly quickly if the Colts aren't prepared.
Yeah, and again, you're talking about Josh Jacobs, a guy who can take advantage of a banged up defensive front. And when you remove Buckner, yes, Raekwon Davis, I think that he can have some. I think he might need a couple of games to get into this kind of defense, live action. Maybe it was just a really bad first game as a Colt. Taven Bryan is just more of your pass rusher. I mean, it's kind of a situation where Adetomo Adebawore also is more of your pass rusher. Now, in the preseason, he displayed way more improvement in the run game. So we'll see, but man, oh man, it's going to be a lot of Grover Stewart having to anchor the interior, and you just hope that Raekwon Davis, if he has to fill in, he'll get a lot of snaps. If Buckner can't play, you just hope he can also kind of anchor that inside.
Regardless, adjustments need to be made for the Indianapolis Colts and the run
Big
defense.
time.
And that's not just the defensive line, it's the linebackers too. Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed weren't very good against the run on Sunday. So especially Zaire Franklin, he really needs to step it up and kind of be the run stuffing middle linebacker that he's being paid to be. And again, really get after the football. Zaire Franklin, I think, knows he needs to perform better, and I think he's going to have a bounce back game and probably look like his normal self. I think that the Colts are going to allow another 200 yards on the ground? No, I don't. But I also don't think that they're going to become the 85 Bears and just limit the Packers to 50 yards on the ground all day. It's going to be something that the Colts will have to deal with, especially if DeForest Buckner is out. You just can't let it get out of hand. Now, Drake, you did talk about the Jaden Reed and Christian Watson and some of the other wide receivers for this Packers offense. Packers wide receivers, they've got a really nice group there. At least, yes. I mean, especially the top three guys. You're looking at, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. You mentioned the tight ends of Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. Against this Colts defensive backfield, and this Colts secondary that is reeling right now. Injury to Juju Brents, who's now likely out for the year. Julian Blackmon hasn't practiced all week with a shoulder injury. These injuries are starting to pile up on guys that we thought might happen because they have injury history. Brents, Blackmon. Now they're both dealing with injuries. We could be looking at a secondary for the Colts where at cornerback you're starting Kenny Moore, Jalen Jones, and Dallas Flowers. And then at the safety spots, it would likely be Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas II again. So going up against this Packers wide receivers, although you don't have a very good quarterback back there, I think it's obvious that the edge goes to this Packers receiving core.
Yeah, and again, this is the NFL, and if you dominate a wide or a defensive back and you're wide the hell open, a quarterback will find you, okay? Willis might not be a high-caliber NFL quarterback, but he's still a quarterback in the NFL. So, they got to step it up, and all of a sudden, after everything you just broke down, Andrew, this is a lot more even of a game than you think, okay? There's a reason it's just 3-point. The Colts are only a 3-point favorite. It's because they don't have a secondary right now. And if Blackmon can't play and you have to put Rodney Thomas out there, it's literally just pass coverage that he excels at. He can't tackle very well, and he can't stop the run. So it's a lot of Nick Cross you're leaning on. Is he ready for that? Who knows? He sure was ready for every single tackle that needed to be made in that first game. So I think that it'll be so interesting because this is a Packers receiver core that I think we're both high on. Especially a guy like Reed, who can be, by the way, also was used as a punt returner last year. So, he is everything. So I think that you really can't let these guys become explosive because just like what the Colts did to the Texans defense, the Packers offense, man, they can still be explosive with Malik Willis.
Yeah, they definitely can. So that's why getting pressure on him and forcing him to be a pocket passer where he's got to read the defense and slow down, not these quick one read throws because the defense is playing 5 to 10 yards off coverage. I think that's going to be key for the Indianapolis Colts moving forward. As far as the safety position, I think I'm okay with Nick Cross playing the strong safety spot if he had to in a pinch. I really am. I especially over the past few weeks, my opinion on Nick Cross has really changed. Do I think he's an all-pro? No. Do I think he's a Pro Bowler? No. But I think he's more than capable of handling that in a pinch. So if Blackmon can't go and Nick Cross has to be the strong safety, I think that's okay. Again, still, we'll have to see about Rodney Thomas. I think that's one of your biggest concerns. Dallas Flowers, who is a healthy scratch last week, is he going to be able to come out and perform as he tries to regain some of that explosiveness after that torn Achilles? It's just a huge unknown. And if Colts were going up against this Packers team like this that had Jordan Love at quarterback, I'd say that Jordan Love's about to have a field day. Since it is Malik Willis, I think that changes everything, and that definitely gives this Colts secondary a lifeline, at least for this week.
Yeah, and look, you just have to call it as it is. Malik Willis is the kind of quarterback, guys, that you could have an open receiver. And yes, while I said he can hit those throws, he is also the kind of quarterback that is so bad he can make a defense look good. So I mean, we'll see what they. I think the Packers have to be very careful with letting Willis throw the football. So yes, I think there are opportunities for the defensive secondary to get a turnover and look good in this game.
And at least right now, watch Malik Willis will go out and throw for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. But at least right now, right now, Malik Willis is on the lower end of backup quarterbacks in the league, which is good news for this Colts defense. X factor time, Drake. Who do you think is going to be the deciding factor in this game for the Indianapolis Colts?
This is offensive or defense?
Anybody on the team.
Oh man. Okay, I'll go with you know what? I'll go with Michael Pittman Jr. because I think that coming off of a game with only 4 catches, only like 31, 32 yards, not much of a statistical impact. I think that he's a guy that, I mean, he showed it last season. He had like a streak of 8 or 9 games with 8 or more catches. I mean, he doesn't have games like that more than one. He usually doesn't have 2 in a row. So give me Michael Pittman.
Michael Pittman. I don't hate that. That's for sure. Especially if the Colts want to get into more rhythm passing. You know, That wasn't the best day for Michael Pittman. Certainly up to his standards. That's because the other wide receivers were certainly eating. But I'm going on the defensive side of the football because again, the Colts have to stop the run. And I do think it has to be because if DeForest Buckner's not going to be out there, you got to have better linebacker play as well. And I think it's going to be Zaire Franklin. I really do. I think Zaire Franklin has to be the man in the middle. He has to step up. He has to be a bigger influence on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, not just about his tackles, but being able to sniff out the run fits, not allowing Josh Jacobs to take over the game, not allowing himself to be driven completely out of the play like he was a few times against the Houston Texans last week. Zaire Franklin has to play better, certainly as that Mike linebacker in the middle. And then if this Packers team really wants to focus on running the football, it's got to be Zaire Franklin. It's got to be those guys in the middle that put a stop to it. Let's look at the chat here. Stats Matt is saying Grover Stewart, another good one when you're talking about the run defense. Andy Racer saying that it's JT. They have to slow the game down, and you do that with the run. So Jonathan Taylor is Andy Racer's X factor as well. All right, Drake, here we go. Prediction time. On Sunday, 1:00 Eastern, Lambeau Field. I can't wait to see the historic Lambeau Field. I am very, very excited to see all the history behind it. Just be in that place. It's going to be a fantastic time. It's supposed to be in the 80s. Really nice day out at Lambeau Field. But who you got as the Colts travel up north to take on the Green Bay Packers without Jordan Love? Who do you got, and what's your final score?
So I've got the Colts winning this one, and I've got it 21-13. All right, okay. So I think that's going to be more of your defensive variety. I love the under on this one. I think that the Colts, yes, Richardson's going to have his moments, but the Packers, man, they are going to be far more ready for that deep ball. They're going to force him to try to do more underneath. And I think that you're going to have shorter completions this time, not 9 completions for 23 yards per completion. You know, I think it's going to be a little bit more dialed down. But give me 21-13. I think the Colts probably get a couple turnovers in this one too.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the Colts do snag a couple of turnovers. They were close to getting C.J. Stroud on a couple of them, but I think they have a better opportunity against Malik Willis this week. The chat putting in their suggestion stats. Matt, 27-16 Colts. We've got Paul Wilson, 24-13 Colts. Good to see you, Paul. But we've got Lockwood. Go Pack, go. There we go. So with laughing
emojis.
Yeah. So hey, listen, if you are a true Packers fan, Godspeed and thank you for joining us. I don't know how it's going to work out for you this weekend though. Here, super sticker time from my beautiful wife Danielle. Hey, really appreciate it and appreciate all of your support. Really, really do. So and then Drake, this is going to be interesting here. I do think that the Colts win this game. I've been having trouble trying to think of a final score. Uh,
Yeah.
we'll have because I think it could go one of two ways. If the Packers really dominate on the ground, and like the Texans did, I think this game could be a lot closer than people think. But ultimately, I do think that the Colts figure it out at least just a little bit. I do think that the Colts are going to be able to stop Malik Willis. So ultimately, I am going to go Colts 24. Colts 24, Packers 10. I don't think this game is going to be close. I do think that the Colts are going to get plenty of action out of Jonathan Taylor on Sunday going up against this Packers defense. Do I expect Anthony Richardson to be heavily involved in the run game? I think that the Packers will probably focus in on not allowing Richardson to do anything with his legs, kind of similar to Jalen Hurts. But I do think that it's going to come at the expense of of stopping Jonathan Taylor. I do think Jonathan Taylor is going to go out there, have a really good game, a take over the world game. Really, I don't think so. But Jonathan Taylor could go out there, have close to 100 yards, have a touchdown, and the Colts are going to control this game much better than I think that they did against the Houston Texans. I think you also will see a little bit of an improvement from Anthony Richardson as far as hitting those short to intermediate throws. So I'm going Colts 24. Colts 24. Packers 10. Definitely hammer the under in this one. I don't think that we're hitting 40 points, even though life's too short to bet the under. I've heard before, but still, if you're betting, I would take the Colts to cover. I don't bet on the Colts. You don't bet on the Colts. Bad juju, especially Brandon Moses. But definitely take the Colts to cover and the under in this game. And I think the Colts get their first win of the season.
Yeah, and look, this is a game that has pitfall written all over it. But what that spells to coaching staffs is be on your best behavior when it comes to preparing for this game. So, like you said, I think that at the best, the Colts figured this out immediately defensively. It's all going to be what they do defensively. That's going to make or break this game. Okay, but if they do, at the worst, have issues at first, I do believe that, like you said, they'll at least figure it out enough to get by and get a win.
Yeah, exactly. So Drake and I are both on the Colts for this weekend, and pretty handily as well. We'll see if the Colts end up taking the Packers lightly and Josh Jacobs and Malik Willis actually kind of overachieve, in my opinion. But ultimately, I do think that the Colts are going to come out with the victory. Paul Wilson, thank you so much, brother, for the $5 super chat. Really, really do appreciate it. And Paul says, I lost my voice on Sunday. Same here, brother. Same here. The crowd was amazing. I'm so worried about what I saw from the Colts defense. So, I think a lot of Colts fans were worried about what they saw. They're going to have to go out there and prove that they can adjust and get better from this. But Paul, thank you so much for the super chat. Really, really do appreciate it. And I did want to give a shout out here. I missed this one earlier from Brandon Smith. He said, it's mine and my wife's anniversary today. Can you give Brando and Brandy a shout out, please? Hey, Brando and Brandy, congrats on your anniversary. Thank you for joining us on your anniversary. You should be spending time with your wife, not watching the Horseshoe Huddle podcast, brother. But hey, thanks for joining us, and shout out to you guys. Happy anniversary to you both. Drake, let's talk about the injury report, and here's where we're got to talk about the big injury, the elephant in the room that happened or came out earlier this week. Unfortunately for the Colts, Juju Brents is done for the season. He had a little bit of a knee injury on Sunday, played through it, didn't think it was anything serious. However, when the Colts gave him an MRI, or he underwent an MRI on Monday, it turned out to be much more serious than originally thought. And it doesn't look like Juju Brents is going to be back this season. The Colts have said that there is a chance he comes back in late December, but unless I actually see that it's close, I'm going to believe that Juju Brents is done for the year. And first off, terrible heartbreak for Juju Brents. On a year that he really needed to stay healthy, Drake, he gets one game in and is done for the year after missing half the season last year. Second round pick with a lot of talent and a lot of potential to be one of the starting quarterbacks for the Colts for the foreseeable future. But he's kind of in the same boat as Jelani Woods. All the potential, hell of an athlete, but he can't stay healthy. And so unless you can really stay healthy, best ability is availability. If you're not out there, it's kind of hard to maximize your potential. So really, really feel bad for Juju Brents and for what was going to be a really important season for number 29.
Yeah, and he kind of gets lost when we're talking about, everyone talks about Jalen Jones. Some people are like, obviously, hey, this guy could potentially be a starting cornerback, and Kenny Moore is Kenny Moore. But man, Juju Brents had the most potential, like you mentioned. He had the most athleticism probably of any of the cornerbacks. He had the most length, the most disruption ability. I think he, outside of Kenny Moore, he's probably the best at turning the ball or forcing turnovers. So it's like you're missing your number one outside corner, actually. That's your number one outside corner that's poof, he's gone. So I think that Chris Ballard really was banking on the health of Juju Brents, and that's why he went with 10 deep on that defensive front. Now, hey, earlier in the season, I can't remember who mentioned this, but it was brilliant. Or he mentioned like 2 weeks ago, if my beliefs and the way that I do things as GM, paraphrasing here, get me fired, so be it. Well, it just might. Like if this doesn't work out, now Andrew did mention it's not going to happen overnight, because if they get rid of Ballard, you're untying Richardson, you're untying Steichen. So it's going to be a while down the road, but this might be the start of it all if they let up too much in the secondary, man, because there's a big hole in the Colts secondary right now.
When you play with fire, you're bound to get burned, and the Colts so far are looking like they're getting burned in the secondary. But let's look at the rest of the injury report here, Drake, from this week. Julian Blackmon, like we mentioned earlier in the show, has not practiced this week due to the shoulder injury. I would say for Blackmon, he's going to have to practice at least in some capacity tomorrow for him to be questionable, because if not, then the Colts are likely rolling out Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas as the starting safeties against the Packers.
Yeah, and I mean that's crucial, because you're talking about your best communicator, your best overall safety. He can play strong or free. But yeah, if Nick Cross has to play strong safety, I think that, like you mentioned earlier, I think that's enough to make you comfortable for a game at least.
Yeah, I would agree. DeForest Buckner hasn't practiced either, but we've seen DeForest Buckner go without practicing and still play. I ultimately think that's going to be the case on Sunday. Kwity Paye hasn't practiced either on Sunday, another defensive lineman for the Indianapolis Colts. Kwity Paye had a really good game against the Texans. I think he had a 17% pressure percentage, and had one of the top pass rush win rates in the entire NFL on Sunday. So Kwity Paye kind of picking up where we thought he was going to be, taking that next step. It would really stink for Kwity Paye to miss time with a hamstring injury and kind of have to start all over with that momentum. You hope it's something minor and that Kwity Paye could go out there and play on Sunday, because if not, again, it would be huge for this Colts defense, but it might also result in Latu getting more time as well on Sunday. You want Kwity Paye to be out there and playing for this Colts team.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of Tyquan Lewis and Latu, because they didn't play a lot of Dio Dengbo on Sunday against the Texans. But yeah, if you're already going to – if Paye can't play, that means already in week 2 you're going to be without Ebicom and you're going to be without Paye. And so you're already diving into the depth that you prepared, I guess, for defensive end.
Exactly. Josh Downs has been limited all week. Again, if he does play, I think it'll probably be on a pitch count. And Matt Gay has been full practice all week with that hernia injury. Shane Steichen said he is good to go. So I'd fully expect Matt Gay to be out there kicking for the Colts again on Sunday.
Yeah, if this becomes a game where it's like in the trenches and it's a game of inches, I mean, it could come down to Matt Gay's legs. So you're hoping he's 100% and that he's ready to hit those important kicks, man.
Exactly. Big injuries on the defensive side of the football. Luckily for the Colts, again, Malik Willis is out there at quarterback, but at the same time, you can't you still can't go into this game taking this Packers offense lightly. That's a really good way for the Packers to surprise you, and you end up getting burned by that. Let's go over the latest Colts news and rumors before we get out of here, Drake. Some different some roster moves because of the Juju Brents injury. The Colts actually elevated Chris Lamons from the practice squad to the active roster to replace Juju Brent's spot. So still 5 cornerbacks on the active roster, but again, Lamons is more of a guy that plays inside. So the guys outside, theoretically, that are going to be replacing Juju Brents, Dallas Flowers and Samuel Womack III.
Yeah, and so Samuel Womack obviously was brought in. He's a pretty secure tackler, but not a lot of experience. And then the concern with Dallas Flowers for me and Andrew, and we talked about this, he was a healthy scratch during the Texans game. So you're taking a dude that you were like, we're not comfortable with you playing, even though you can play. And you want to put him out there now. I don't know. That's pretty concerning to me. So
yeah, we'll have to see how Dallas Flowers perform, because in the preseason it wasn't pretty. The Colts also signed Ronnie Harrison Jr. Ronnie Harrison Jr. is back with the team on the practice squad. Probably insurance for the Julian Blackmon injury as well. And then they did make a move at cornerback on the practice squad, signing Kelvin Joseph, the former, I think he was with the Cowboys, the Dolphins, and the Seahawks, if I remember correctly. Drake, you wrote a piece for horseshoehuddle.com this week about Kelvin Joseph. Tell us a little bit about him.
So, I mean, the Colts have seen him, obviously, but he's a former pick from the Cowboys that didn't pan out, ended up playing for a couple different teams last year. So I think that when you talk about cornerbacks, man, outside of Ahkello Witherspoon, who now is a Ram again, I mean, it is slim pickings out there. You're really, really trying to dig deep to find talent.
Yeah, exactly. So with Chris Lamons coming up, there was another spot for a cornerback on the practice squad. Kelvin Joseph takes that spot. And to make room for Kelvin Joseph and Ronnie Harrison, the Colts did waive defensive end Titus Leo, the former 6th-round pick from the practice squad. So those are all the moves this week. But as the Colts head up to Lambeau Field to take on the Packers, Drake, I think you can have some confidence that this Colts team should be the favorite to win on Sunday. But again, you got to go out there and prove it on the football field. Can't take this team lightly, cannot take the offense lightly, especially even though that Jordan Love is not out there, because Josh Jacobs could very easily take over the game, and the Colts are staring there and looking at themselves at another wasted opportunity, and also sitting at 0-2 to start the season. They got to go up there and take care of business.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, quarterback is important, but I mean, the Packers, they have some incredible weapons. They've got great defensive players, and they've got a hell of a head coach in Matt LaFleur. So if you walk into their stadium and you don't take them serious with all those fans wearing cheese on their head, these people are crazy, man. They're going to drive you out of there with a loss. Better be careful.
It's going to be a hell of a game on Sunday. And that's our show for everyone tonight. Really, really appreciate everyone's support and for coming along to talk Colts Packers with us this evening. Want to give a shout out to our super chats, Paul Wilson and my beautiful wife, Danielle. Thank you so much for all of your support, and everyone else that joined the chat this evening to talk about Colts football. Be sure to go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts_SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night. You never want to miss us. And then wherever you listen on podcasts, be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can rise in the rankings and we continue to reach other Colts fans just like you. Drake, I know you've got a couple of pieces out there and some still to come previewing this game between the Packers and the Colts. Tell them what the people should go check out.
Yeah, so I actually did one piece. Let me see where it was at. Yeah, so I did one that was breaking down the rising stock after the loss of the Texans, so that you can actually go check that out and see who's got some momentum going into this game against the Packers. And then what I'm going to be releasing tomorrow morning is the 5 keys to a Colts win against the Packers on Sunday. So go check that out with the rest of our awesome writers at Indianapolis Colts on that site.
Exactly. Myself, I do have a piece out there on Anthony Richardson, who was talking about what this Colts offense needs to do in order to beat the Packers. While the explosives are good, they still need to sustain drives. So he went into detail about that, as well as what he is looking to improve on this Sunday. And then tomorrow, I'll have another piece out, this time from the defensive side of the ball, as DeForest Buckner and Zaire Franklin answered questions this week about the run defense and what they need to do to shore that up as they take on Josh Jacobs this weekend. So go give those a read. And like Drake said, everything else on horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back Monday night live here on YouTube to discuss everything that happens between the Colts and the Packers on Sunday. It's going to be a hell of a game. Great atmosphere. I can't wait to get up to Lambeau Field to take it all in. And Colts fans, we'll see you right back here on Monday night, maybe with our first victory Monday of the year. We'll see you then.